Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm here with our resident expert to unpack something really fascinating.
Hey everyone. Yeah, we've got a great one today. It's a bit of a mind bender, honestly.
It really is. So to start off, I want you to close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
Just picture a very specific kind of contrast. You're standing in the middle of a massive city. To your left, you have a river that's been, heavily industrialized for a century.
Right.
And to your right, you have heavy rail lines with commuter trains just screaming past every few minutes.
So deep in the concrete jungle.
Exactly, deep in the noise. But where you are standing, right in the center of all that chaos, it is dead silent.
Wow.
You're just surrounded by tall prairie grasses, chirping birds, and the smell of wildflowers.
It sounds like a glitch in the simulation, honestly.
It really does. You are standing in a 7.3 hectare, that's roughly 18 acres, by the way, oasis. It's called Corktown Common.
Right, in the West Elm lands of Toronto.
Yes, exactly. Toronto, Ontario. And if you go there on a Saturday, you see families picnicking, people jogging, dogs playing fetch. It looks like this absolute masterpiece of landscape architecture.
Which it is.
It is. But here is the thing that stops me in my tracks every single time I dig into the research on this place. This isn't just a park.
No, not at all.
If you were to, say, peel back that layer of beautiful green grass and dig into the soil, you'd realize you aren't standing on a recreational space. You are standing on a machine.
A very big machine.
A massive piece of survival infrastructure that's just disguised as a playground.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Corktown Common is a survival machine. It was built to solve two massive competing problems that really every modern city is facing right now.
Right.
One, we are totally desperate for green space because urban density is going up everywhere. And two, we are facing the increasing threat of catastrophic natural disasters.
Yeah, climate threats.
Exactly. And this park is basically the ultimate case study on how you solve both of those problems at the exact same time without anyone even realizing it.
So today on the deep dive, that's our mission. We are unpacking the secret identity of Corktown Common.
And we've got some great sources for this.
We do. We've combed through all the historical records of the industrial wasteland this site used to be. We've looked at the government reports on the literal financial disasters that happened here.
Oh, the financial reports are wild.
They are. And we've also got the design breakdowns from the landscape architects, Michael Van Valkenburg Associates.
And we really have to talk about the money, too. Because before this was a success story, this site was a complete financial black hole.
A literal money pit. We are talking hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that just evaporated on this site for absolutely nothing.
For decades.
Right, until a major international sporting event came along and changed the timeline completely.
It's such a wild ride.
Yeah.
But I think we should probably start with that secret identity you mentioned.
Let's do it.
Because if I go to Corktown Common today, I definitely don't see a machine. I just see rolling hills.
Well, that's the magic trick right there. The defining feature of the park is its topography. It's incredibly hilly, especially on the eastern side.
Yeah.
And to the untrained eye, that just looks like aesthetic landscaping. You walk in and you think, oh, the designers wanted to give us a nice view of the city.
But functionally, those hills are a wall.
Exactly. We are looking at a flood protection landform.
Right. A berm.
In engineering terms, yes, a berm. It acts as a shield. It's roughly 4 meters high in places, which effectively creates a barrier 8.5 meters, or about 28 feet above the danger zone of the river.
And we need to clarify the stakes here because, flood protection can sound a bit abstract until you actually look at the hydrology reports.
Right.
The source documentation talks a lot about the 500-year storm.
Which is a term that I think people misunderstand constantly.
Oh, all the time. It doesn't mean the storm only happens once every 5 centuries, like clockwork.
Right. Nature doesn't have a calendar.
Exactly. It's a probability statistic. It just means that in any given year, there is a specific very low risk of a storm so massive that it would completely overwhelm normal infrastructure.
Right.
But low probability over a long enough timeline eventually becomes a certainty. And if that storm hits Toronto without this park...
The Don River overflows, and we aren't talking about a few puddles on a bike path here.
No, not at all. We're talking about the river violently bursting its banks and sweeping right into Toronto's eastern downtown.
Wow.
You'd have catastrophic damage. The financial district, residential neighborhoods, transit infrastructure. It would be a disaster on a massive scale.
So the design of Corktown Common is essentially a hydraulic shunt.
That is a really great way to put it. The berm is engineered to physically block that water,
Mm.
and the overall shape of the park shunts those floodwaters south, directly toward Lake Ontario and away from the buildings and the people.
It really changes the vibe of walking your dog there, doesn't it?
It totally does.
You realize you aren't just walking up a nice grassy hill. You are literally walking on the levee that keeps the entire neighborhood dry.
And here's the context that I found most interesting in the planning documents. This berm wasn't just an add-on.
What do you mean?
Well, it wasn't like they designed a park and then someone said, hey, let's make it flood-proof too. This berm was the prerequisite for the entire neighborhood.
Because legally, the West Don Lands area was designated as a floodplain.
Exactly. It was completely uninsurable. You literally could not build a single condo, coffee shop, or road in that area until this berm was finished.
So the government's hands were tied.
They had to physically remove the land from the regulatory floodplain map by building this massive structure before any development could even break ground.
So the park is the literal foundation for the entire community that surrounds it today.
It is. The park had to come first.
But the neighborhood wasn't always there. And this is where I want to pivot to the history, because the backstory of this land is, well, gritty is an understatement.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
If we rewind the clock, we aren't seeing prairie grass and dog parks. We're seeing smoke, steel, and livestock.
Lots and lots of livestock. This was the home of the William Davies Company.
Which, for those of you who aren't up on your deep Toronto history, was a massive pork processing operation.
One of the largest in the entire British Empire at the time. This operation is actually a huge part of why Toronto got the nickname Hogtown.
Right.
So picture this for a second. You have massive meatpacking plants, huge rendering facilities, and just acres upon acres of rail yards to move the product in and out. This was the beating industrial engine of the city for a very long time.
It's so hard to imagine now when you're sitting on a beautiful park bench there, but the ground you're sitting on was soaked in the toxic byproducts of industry for decades.
Right. And like a lot of industrial zones in North American cities, the 20th century wasn't kind to it. As the meat industry consolidated and logistics changed, the processing plants moved out to the suburbs or just shut down entirely.
The trains stopped coming as frequently.
Exactly. And by the 1970s, what was left?
Abandonment, just a scarred, completely empty landscape.
And this leads us to a chapter in the source documents that honestly reads like a tragedy. The Adatiri Project.
Oh man, I went down such a rabbit hole in Adatiri. It is the ultimate cautionary tale.
It really is.
So let's set the scene for you listening. It's the late 1980s. The city of Toronto and the province of Ontario look at this huge wasteland downtown and say, we can fix this.
They needed housing.
Right, there was a housing crisis in the 80s, so they say, let's build a massive new community.
It was a very bold vision. So in 1988, they expropriated the land in the West Don Lands. And expropriated just means the government legally seized the private land for public use, paying out the owners.
Right.
The goal was to build this mixed-income community called Adatiri to solve that housing crisis.
But they ran into two massive walls almost immediately.
Yeah.
We already talked about the flood risk. You obviously can't build houses in an active riverbed. But the second wall was the dirt itself.
Right. Because you cannot run a massive pork processing plant and a rail yard for a century without severe consequences. The soil was incredibly toxic.
We're talking hydrocarbons, heavy metals, industrial sludge.
It was a total chemical cocktail.
So before they can build a single apartment building, they have to clean the dirt. And looking at the budget sheets from back then,
It wasn't going well.
it was a complete financial disaster. By 1992, the government had spent roughly $350 million.
$350 million.
In 1992 dollars, that is a staggering amount of money.
And here's the real kicker. They hadn't laid a single brick.
Not one.
That money was just for purchasing the land, evicting the commercial tenants, and trying to start the cleanup. And then the new projections came in. It was going to cost another $1 billion to actually finish the project.
Another billion. And then the final nail in the coffin hit.
The economy fell off a cliff. The real estate market crashed hard in the early 90s.
Right.
So the private money that was supposed to help fund the housing construction just evaporated overnight.
So you have a highly toxic money pit, a massive global recession, and a very angry public asking where their tax dollars went.
Enter the Bob Rae government in 1993. They looked at the math, they looked at the massive provincial deficit, and they just pulled the plug.
Just like that. Canceled.
Completely canceled.
That is just heartbreaking. Think about the waste there. $350 million gone, and the land just sat there anyway.
For 15 years, it became this fenced-off scar in the middle of the city. a literal do not enter zone.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of urban paralysis. The problem is too big, the cost to fix it is too high, so nobody touches it. It just sits there, rotting.
But obviously, we're talking about a thriving park today, so something eventually broke the deadlock.
Waterfront Toronto.
Right. This was the new entity formed in the 2000s. It was a joint venture between the city, the province, and the federal government.
Yeah.
Their mandate was basically fix the waterfront finally, stop talking about it, and just do it.
And they identified the West Don lands as one of their first 4 priority projects. So they came up with a new plan in 2004. But
Let me guess. Economic trouble again.
history has a funny way of rhyming. The 2008 financial crisis hit.
Oh, right.
Just as they were gearing up to finally tackle this toxic site, the global markets melted down again. It looked like the project might stall out for a second time.
But this time, they had an ace in the hole. Or maybe a ticking clock is a better description.
The Pan American Games.
It is amazing how a hard deadline changes things in government.
It changes absolutely everything. Toronto won the bid to host the 2015 Pan Am Games.
Right.
And to do that, they needed an athletes' village. They needed to house thousands of athletes and officials from all over the world, and they decided the West Don lands was the perfect place to do it.
And unlike a generic housing target where a politician can say, oh, we'll delay it a year, you cannot move the date of an international sporting event.
Exactly. The opening ceremony is happening on that date whether you are ready or not, so it forced the funding to finally unlock. To host the athletes, the buildings had to be legally insurable. To be insurable, the flood barrier had to be built. And to build the barrier, the soil had to be remediated.
The dominoes had to fall.
It completely broke the paralysis. The park had to be ready for the games first. It actually served as the front lawn for the athletes during the event and then was turned over to the public afterward.
So let's talk about that construction process, because building a high-end park on top of a toxic industrial graveyard isn't exactly simple gardening.
No, this is extreme engineering.
Yeah.
The final price tag for the park was around 135 million Canadian dollars.
Wow.
And the design was led by Michael van Valkenburg Associates, who are absolute giants in the landscape architecture world.
And they had to deal with that toxic soil. You can't just plant a nice oak tree in industrial sludge.
Right, and this is the really clever part. We mentioned the berm as a flood barrier, but it actually serves a second function. It's also a cap. They brought in massive amounts of fresh, clean soil from off-site to build the topography. So they effectively sealed the remediated industrial lands underneath a thick layer of fresh, clean earth.
So it's a lid. They built a new world on top of the old one.
Precisely. And they were incredibly specific about what they planted in that new world. I was reading through the planting lists in the design docs, and it's not just generic grass.
No, it's a full-on ecological restoration project.
It really is. They planted over 700 trees and thousands of native shrubs. But the goal was specifically to recreate the Southern Ontario Carolinian forest.
Which is the native ecosystem for this region, right? From before the factories arrived.
Right. It's a very biodiverse, rich ecosystem. They also included an urban prairie on the riverside of the park.
Right. I read about that.
That's about 3.2 hectares, nearly 8 acres of tall native grasses and wildflowers. It's designed to precisely mimic what this land looked like centuries ago.
And there's a major water component inside the park, too, right? The urban marsh.
Which ties the whole water theme back together. The marsh isn't just there to look pretty. It's a functional wetland that helps manage stormwater within the park itself.
How does it work?
It captures the rain, filters it naturally through the aquatic plants, and then reuses it for irrigation. It's a closed loop. So they aren't just blocking the river water with the berm. They are actively respecting the water cycle inside the park boundaries.
It's fascinating because it creates this constructed ecology. It's totally artificial in the sense that they built it from scratch with bulldozers, but it functions exactly like a real ecosystem.
And that really is the future of urban design.
Yeah.
We can't just go out and find pristine nature in the city anymore. We have to build it.
So let's take the listener inside. We've covered the heavy history and the engineering. If you walk into Corktown Common today, what is the actual experience? Because despite all this intense engineering, it doesn't feel like a science experiment when you're there.
No, not at all. It feels like a true community hub. The layout is this really interesting mix of the wild and the civilized.
You've got the recreational stuff on one side, the athletic fields, the open lawns where people are playing frisbee.
And the splash pad, which is absolutely huge for families in the summer.
Oh, yeah.
But look at the social infrastructure they included. They put in large communal tables, a barbecue area, and this is actually my favorite detail in the whole park. A fireplace.
The fireplace in a public park. That is such a specific, unusual choice.
It is. But think about what a fireplace signifies to us culturally.
Warmth?
Warmth, yes, but also the home. It signifies gathering. By putting a fireplace in a public park, the designers are basically saying, this is your living room.
Oh, I love that.
It invites total strangers to gather around a hearth. It turns a large, anonymous public space into an intimate domestic space.
And for the more active crowd, you have the bike paths that seamlessly connect to the wider city trails, you have the boardwalks running right through the marsh, and a great off-leash dog area.
And we definitely can't forget the art. If you've been there, you can't miss the large sculpture by Mark de Severo.
Oh, right, the one called No Shoes.
No shoes, yeah. It's this large, abstract steel structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the name just fits the space perfectly.
Because you take your shoes off.
Exactly. No shoes suggests grounding, taking your shoes off, feeling the actual grass, connecting physically with the earth.
Which is deeply ironic given that the earth you're connecting with is imported soil sitting on top of an industrial cap.
True.
But it works. And the location itself really adds to that sharp contrast. We are east of Bayview Avenue, south of King Street, but just look at the borders.
You are completely sandwiched. You have the Don River on one side, which represents nature, or at least the city's attempt to manage nature.
Right.
But on the exact opposite side, you have the Jugo train commuter lines and the CN rail lines.
It gets really loud sometimes.
It does. But honestly, that's the point. You are standing in a restored Carolinian forest, watching a butterfly land on a native wildflower, and 50 yards away, a massive commuter train is tearing past, carrying thousands of people.
It's nature, but it's nature that has been forcefully squeezed back into the city.
It's a very Toronto experience. It's not pretending the city doesn't exist around it. It's actively integrating with it.
It acknowledges the context. It's reclaimed land, not virgin land. It's a scar that has finally healed.
So when we step back and look at the whole picture, from the massive pork plants to the failed Etatiri project, to the Pan Am rescue, to this flood-protecting berm, what do you think is the big takeaway here?
I mean, for me, I think Corktown Common is the ultimate proof of concept for the multitasking landscape.
Meaning a park can't just be a park anymore.
Exactly. In a dense, modern city where land is incredibly expensive and climate risks are rising every year, you just can't afford a single-use space.
Right.
We can't just build an ugly concrete flood wall. That's a total waste of valuable downtown real estate. And on the flip side, you can't just have a pretty park that gets completely washed away in the first big 500-year storm. That's just bad planning.
Corktown Common does it all.
It does. It heals the scar of pollution through the remediation cap. It protects the financial security of the city against the flood risk. And it creates a beautiful backyard for thousands of residents. It solves three massive problems: pollution, climate risk, and livability with one single project.
And, for me, the lesson is also about persistence. Or maybe just timing.
How so?
Well, the Atatiri failure in the 90s made it seem like this land was totally cursed. People looked at it and thought, this is a dead zone.
Right.
We threw $350 million at it and got nothing.
Right. Untouchable.
But it wasn't dead. It just hadn't found the right urgency yet.
It needed the deadline.
It needed the deadline. It proves that even the biggest, messiest, most toxic failures in urban planning can be turned around if you have the engineering smarts and the political will, which usually comes in the form of an international sporting event, to force it through.
It gives you hope for other wastelands in other cities, honestly.
It really does. Every major city has that one spot, the old rail yard, the abandoned factory by the river that everyone says is just hopeless. Corktown Common proves it's never hopeless. It's just waiting for the right design.
Absolutely. So here is a thought for you to take with you today. Next time you are out jogging through a city park or walking your dog, and you find yourself walking up a surprisingly steep, beautifully landscaped hill.
Don't just complain about the cardio.
Exactly. Ask yourself, is this just pretty scenery? Or is this hill secretly saving my basement from a catastrophic flood? Because you really never know what kind of machine is buried under the grass.
It's always worth asking what lies beneath.
It really is. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Corktown Common. We'll catch you on the next one.